In-class problem, discovery of drug side effect, Gatifloxacin, tutorial 25. For those who wish to get deeper insight into cohort building and its use in solving analytic problems in accountable healthcare, please read Riddles in Accountable Healthcare by Eran Bellin, available as paperback from Amazon in Kindle or in paperback. The objectives of this exercise: learn to build medication prescription sets. Learn to build medication prescription sets with either Find or Explore. Learn how and why to use a subgroup. Learn how to use blackout period in Study Designer time to outcome method and why. Realize that you can recapitulate studies in the medical literature using clinical looking glass with local data. And this is the actual study you're going to recapitulate. Outpatient Gatifloxacin therapy and dysglycemia in older adults, the New England Journal of Medicine. The cohort criteria. The case group is to be made up of outpatients prescribed Gatifloxacin. The control group, made up of outpatients prescribed a macrolide. Both groups are going to be made up of patients older than age 65. We purposely choose older patients because they're more susceptible to the side effects. They have less homeostatic control, and we will see a side effect if it appears. The time period we're going to look at is January 1st, 2004 to March 6, 2006, inclusive of 1104, that's why the square bracket, and excluding 3606 on the right. The outcome criteria: we're going to have a glucose whose lab test type is known as a glucose combo, FSG plus glucose. You'll find it in the system that way, that is both a fingerstick glucose or a glucose. Hyperglycemia is to be defined in the study as greater than or equal to 250. Hypoglycemia is to be defined in the study as less than or equal to 50. And dysglycemia is either hypoglycemia or hyperglycemia. Now let's go to clinical looking glass. We're first going to go to event canvas, and we're going to build our two cohorts. We're first going to build our medication sets. We need to get a medication set for Gatifloxacin and a medication set for the macrolides. So normally we go to the three-dotted button once we are building our cohorts, but I will show you another way to do this. You can go to Tools, Set Builder, left-click on Set Builder, and a window will open up, which is a Set Builder window, and now you have to specify what the set type is. Normally, when you use a three-dotted button, the three-dotted button knows where you're coming from. It knows what set you're going to need. In this case, we're going to have to define the set, and it's going to be a medication set. Now, medication sets are used both for the prescription event, which is the outpatient medication, for the medication event, which is the inpatient medication order, and for the administration internal medicine event. We're not going to choose an existing set. We're going to first look for Gatifloxacin. And this is going to look for the exact letters. You could put Gata, Gatiflox, let's find. So you type in the search option, Gatiflox, and find. Now what appears are these two Gatifloxacin. You can see one is clearly an intravenous medication, Gatifloxacin D5W. I'm going to include it as well as the usual Gatifloxacin, because when I use the prescription order, it will basically ignore the D5W if it hasn't been prescribed in the outpatient. So I'm going to I could highlight each one with a control hold and then use add, or I just hit add all. And now I'm going to save it. I'm going to call this Gatifloxacin. Now, for macrolide, let's clear it. For the macrolide set, maybe you'd be tempted to type macrolide and find it, but you wouldn't find any macrolide. This is a class of drug. You'd have to know there's erythromycin, there's azithromycin, there is clarithromycin. It's all part of the set. If, however, you don't know what are the different macrolide drugs that you want, you have to basically explore the data set. We use FDB in our system here, so we can explore, and at each level of aggregation, you can go down a bit. You explore at different levels of aggregation. So first we take a look at the first level, and we're told there's something called a therapeutic class. We hit go. Now all the medications that fit into a therapeutic class are here. This is a huge set of medications. You can choose alternative therapies, anti-infective agents, anti-neoplastics. Clearly we're dealing with antimicrobials, so it'll be an anti-infective agent, and we'll hit go. Now it shows up in the Explorer list are a whole bunch of anti-infectives. But if you take a look within that group, you have antibacterials, antifungals. We're going to choose antibacterials. Go. And now within the antibacterial at that level, we have a whole bunch of antibacterials. And here we have something called macrolide antibiotics in combinations. Go. Now it's showing up are just the macrolide antibiotics and their combinations. If we want only the macrolides, I click on that and hit go, and now I have a set of just the macrolides. Azithro, clarithro, erythro, and these other agents. I'm going to add all of them. In fact, I'm going to just leave it with the erythromycin, the azithro, clarithro, and erythromycin. Get rid of these last two. I'll move this one as well. So basically I have azithromycin, clarithro, and erythromycin as my macrolides. I'm going to save it, and I'm going to save it as a macrolide. So now I've created my two sets, my macrolide set and my Gatifloxacin set. And now I'm ready to actually go to my cohort. Having built our medication sets, we're now ready to build our cohorts. To do this, we're going to go to Event Canvas. First, we're going to create a new folder, and the new folder we're going to call dysglycemia Gatifloxacin. Then we're going to right-click on the folder and choose left-click on cohort. And the cohort we're going to name Gatifloxacin. We're going to choose earliest. We're going to choose our event definition. And our event definition is going to be a Gatifloxacin prescription, or RX. Let's take a look at the drop-down menu and see a couple of things. There's something called a med order. Medication orders are medications ordered in the hospital. Intern med admin date is the date the medication was actually administered in the hospital. Then we have something called prescription start and prescription end. These are old event types that no longer exist in LookingGlass. And then we have prescription written date. All outpatient prescriptions for all time in LookingGlass are known as prescription written date events. We choose that. And now we're going to add a condition, and that condition is going to be a medication type, which is going to be Gatifloxacin. So we've chosen an outpatient prescription of Gatifloxacin. Now we have to choose a duration when that Gatifloxacin prescription was started. And it's going to be, the duration is going to be January of 04 to March 6 of 06. One 04 up to but not including March 6. Update and close. And the other requirement is going to be a demographic. We want all our patients to be older than 65. And the reason for that is older people are more susceptible to side effects, so you can pick them up more easily in older adults. Earliest Gatifloxacin prescription written in the outpatient between January 1st of 04 to March 6th of 06 with age greater than or equal to 65. There are 2,596 patients. Now we want to build the macrolide group. We want to take advantage of the fact that we've already built most of the skeleton for this already, so we check off Save As. This prevents an overwrite of the previous group. We open up the first line here. We change it to the word to macrolide. And now we're going to modify the event definition. So instead of being Gatifloxacin RX, it's going to be a macrolide RX. And we do that by changing the condition from medication type Gatifloxacin to medication type macrolide. Update and close. And we build it. And we have 2,295 unique people who were started on the macrolide. So now we have both our cohorts and we're ready to do our studies. So we go to Study Designer. And we add our study. And we call it Gatifloxacin dysglycemia. We have to choose our groups. We're going to start with the macrolide group. That's going to be our baseline. We're going to add another group, which is going to be our Gatifloxacin group. And we're choosing the baseline to be the macrolide. So now we are going to build the method. Method type is a timed outcome. We're going to name it hyperglycemia. We're going to add it. We notice we have a start flag, going forward in time to the end flag, and an outcome. Let's set it first a blackout period of 2 days because we want to give the patient enough time to fill his prescription and actually take the medication. So we don't want to measure anything in the first 2 days. We want to follow the patient for 30 days as his outcome. to the outcome. And now we have to define hyperglycemia. So let's click on the triple button to actually build this. It's opening up an event. Hyperglycemia. It's a lab test. The definition. Adding a condition. That first condition is lab test type equals to. We're going to look for glucose. And it's a combo glucose, finger stick glucose plus blood glucose. Now we're going to add another criteria to the definition, and that other criteria is lab test value. And since we want the hyperglycemia to be significant, we're going to choose a hyperglycemia of 250. And now you close and exit. And I exit management pane. And I choose it from my drop down. I choose my time intervals to be 1, 3 days, 5 days, 7 days, 10 days, 15 days, 20, 30. I call this hyperglycemia. And I run my method. There are 710 males who are on macrolides, 1585 females on macrolides, 938 males on Gatifloxacin, 1657 females on Gatifloxacin. The median age is 74 in the macrolides, 76 in Gatifloxacin. There's some inexactitude in the two groups. They're not exactly the same. You could build statistical models. We're going to avoid this for the moment. Let's take a look at the target event. On the x-axis are the number of days that have elapsed from the Gatifloxacin or the macrolide being prescribed, actually from day 2, and the cumulative percent who have had at least one measure of hyperglycemia. You notice in the first time period here, from 0 to 2 days, there's nothing here. That's because it's a blackout period. And then you begin to see the yellow band climbing faster than the black band in terms of cumulative percent. There's more cumulative percent of this orange band than there is of the black. Gatifloxacin is getting to hyperglycemia faster than the macrolide. The p-value is significantly less than 0. And if you take a look at the different days, you can actually see what percentage of the population has hyperglycemia. The macrolide is 2.6% versus the Gatifloxacin at 9%. Clearly much more hyperglycemia in the Gatiflox than macrolide at 30 days. And if you take a look at the confidence interval, the 95% confidence interval, you can see the upper limit of the macrolide is 3.3%, and the lower limit of the Gatiflox is 7.9%. The two confidence intervals do not overlap, so there is statistical significance. So we've shown just by hyperglycemia alone, there is a difference between the macrolide and Gatifloxacin. Just to make this point, all events is measuring every single measure of hyperglycemia or sugar, and that's really not meaningful in this particular study. So looking at the all events tab is not helpful. Patient list actually will give you the names of the patients, but that's not really necessary right now. So we have the target event. Looks like more Gatifloxacin than macrolide hyperglycemia. But now let's look at another study. This time we'll take a look at dysglycemia. Again, it'll be a time to outcome. We're going to call it dysglycemia. Again, we're going to have a blackout period of 2 days. Again, we're going to go out to 30 days. But now we have to worry about how we're going to represent dysglycemia. X out that, call it dysglycemia. It's going to be a lab test. And the first condition, as it was in the last time, is going to be a lab test type. The lab test type is going to be glucose, fingerstick glucose in blood. But now we want to represent both hypo and hyperglycemia. We want lab values that are either too low or too high. So what we need to do now is we need to create a parentheses or a subgroup. Right-click here, we add a subgroup. Call the subgroup hyper or hypoglycemia. It comes as an and. We change that to be an or, because it's either or. And now we're going to build those two conditions. Condition 1 is the hyper, that is the lab test value, greater than or equal to 250. And the other one, adding another condition, and that condition is lab test value less than or equal to 50. Update and close. So you have the line number 1, it is the lab test type fingerstick glucose and blood, and then you have a subgroup either hyper or hypo. Save and exit. And now we exit back. We choose from the drop down dysglycemia. We choose the time intervals 1, 3, 5, 7, 10, 15, 20, 30. And we call this dysglycemia. And we run it. So once again, you have the same demographics because the same groups have been studied. Let's take a look at the target event. We see once again Gatifloxacin climbing faster than the macrolide. 3.1% in the macrolide, 9.6% in the Gatifloxacin. We've broadened the definition, right? We have more lab tests that qualify, the high ones and the very low ones. And we want to see whether these are the same. Notice it's 9.6% in the dysglycemic Gatifloxacin, and it's 9.0% in the hyperglycemic alone. So we've gained about 0.6% looking at the too low or hypoglycemic. In the macrolides, it's 3.1% in the dysglycemic. In the hyperglycemic, it's 2.6%. So we gain about 0.5% in the macrolide of too low. But basically, we are showing again that just as there was more hyperglycemia in Gatifloxacin patients, there's more dysglycemia in Gatifloxacin patients. But we're not yet finished, because while we have shown this difference between the two drugs, we can't be sure that the patients are in fact comparable at baseline. So we want to know whether in fact there are more diabetics in the Gatifloxacin group than the macrolide group. If there are more diabetics, then that would explain why there's more hyperglycemia. So we have to look back in time and see whether in fact there's a difference in evidence for diabetes. And the way to do that, one way, see a time to outcome. Elevated hemoglobin A1C. We're going to go to the advanced method. We're going to open up the triple button. I'm going to create an elevated hemoglobin A1C. We'll just call it hemoglobin A1C greater than or equal to 6.5, 730 days before. We're going to edit this and make this the first. Actually, we'll make this the last one before it. So within, (0 to 730 days before the code collection), the new event definition, lab test, condition, add condition, lab test type, equal to hemoglobin A1C. You see a whole bunch of other ones here as well. You'll learn in another study how to take care of this problem, but we'll just use the first one. And now we're going to ask another question, add a condition, and that condition is going to be lab test value greater than or equal to 6.5. Hemoglobin A1C greater than or equal to 6.5, lab test hemoglobin A1C, lab test value greater than or equal to 6.5, update and close. Okay. Or better yet, let's make it the earliest. So we can use the first time in the past 2 years we have this elevation. I'm going to change this to earliest as well on the editing line, the index line. Save and exit. And I choose it from my drop down. When I first build it, when the triple button, it always shows up at the bottom of the list. It's not yet alphabetized. You notice how the model moves in the backward direction to let you know that you're going backwards in time. And now we're going to keep these different intervals, but add 730. And this is presence of diabetes evidence. And we run the study. And basically what we're doing a time to outcome in the backward direction to see what cumulative percent of the Gatifloxacin and macrolide group have actually had an antecedent history of hemoglobin A1C elevation. And what you notice is the two lines come together, Gatifloxacin and macrolide. The macrolide group has a total of about 23.1% of the population with evidence of hemoglobin A1C elevation, and the Gatifloxacin group have about 23.4% evidence of hemoglobin A1C elevation. It's not really very different. So we have no obvious evidence from this of a dramatic difference in the two groups, and that's using a time to outcome. Another way to do this is using the advanced method and list method, and I'll show you that very quickly. And we'll just use this, use list, list presence of hemoglobin A1C elevation. You then get all these other very useful things, gender, race, language, anything else you want. So you can see if there are other differences in the group. We're going to take them all out, delete them here. Actually, you don't need any of this. Taking away all the baseline information. And now what I want is I want to be in the advanced mode. And I want to get the hemoglobin A1C before. This is going to give me the lab test type, the value, the event date. And I also want something called count, because count is going to be a 0 if there's no hemoglobin A1C that's elevated, and a 1 if there is. It's a nice way of being able to rapidly create summaries on how many have one or how many have the other. You also get a chance to see the values of it. So let's run this in wide view because its earliest is only one of each one. And the nice thing about the advanced method, I'm able to use the same analysis definition for both the time to outcome as well as the list method, and it saves me a lot of time. Notice here is the count. 1, there actually was an elevated hemoglobin A1C before. And here is its value, 7.6. Here's 0, there never was. Here's another 1, and it was 6.6. You get a sense of what the elevation actually was. And of course, if you want to study it, you can export it to an Excel file. Open it up. Once again, it's fully self-documented in Looking Glass. You have the cohort of the macrolide, cohort of the Gatifloxacin, the analysis definition, hemoglobin A1C greater than or equal to 6.5, and the data itself. You have the group number. Remembering group number 1 is the macrolide, group number 2 is the Gatifloxacin, and you can build yourself a pivot table. Click Insert, Pivot Table. This is all an Excel feature. You bring group number into your row, and you bring count into your column, and then you bring your group number into your value here, and it's counting them. It's 1764 macrolids with a value of 0, that is, did not have elevated hemoglobin A1C, and 531 that had a value of 1. The nice thing about Excel is you can hover over any of the cells, right-click on it, and then say, show values as percent of row total, and that shows you that 23% of the macrolids have at least one hemoglobin A1C greater than 6.5, and 23.38% have a hemoglobin A1C greater than 6.5 among the Gatifloxacin, very close in value. And of course, the nice thing too is you actually have the raw values to look at, and you can output that to your statistical program if you'd like. So basically, we've now completed our analysis. We have created our group of Gatifloxacin patients, macrolid patients. We've compared them for hyperglycemia alone and showed that after a blackout period of 2 days, there is more hyperglycemia in the Gatifloxacin group. We took a look at dysglycemia, and we saw again that dysglycemia was greater in the Gatifloxacin group. And then we asked and answered the question of whether there is a difference in confounder of the presence of diabetes in the 2 years prior, and found that in fact the two groups are quite similar. So we've recapitulated this study that was actually in the New England Journal of Medicine in data at Montefiore in Looking Glass.